Waiting for that little guy to come up and tell me dismiss. There it is. Yay. All right, welcome everyone. Today we are going to talk about Job Applications 101. This was a presentation that I had a lot of people reach out and said that in your offices, they currently do trainings on just how to fill out a job application from, the get-go, just really covering all of it. And they thought that that was an important one to include. So that's what this is. It feels like it's a little out of sync to me. This should be probably one of the very first presentations that we do when we're talking to job seekers, which maybe that's how we'll do it when we do these recorded ones. I think that probably does make sense. So this presentation is just going to cover everything that a person needs to know when they're applying for a job. And so probably nothing new from our point of view, all things that we know, but good for job seekers, and especially job seekers that haven't been job seeking. In this training, we're going to learn what a person needs as far as information handy to apply for a job, some best practices when you're actually completing the application and what to put in different holes and things like that. And then just some tips and tricks on how to make sure that what they're doing in that application world is actually going to get them the interview. Once a person finds a job that they want to apply for, there's going to be a few different ways that that employer is going to want them to apply. And there's no telling what it's going to be until you get that job description and read it. The process is going to begin when an employer identifies that they have a hiring need. And they're going to review and revise the job description and probably mention it internally before they even post it externally. And this is where step one, networking, comes in so very handy. Many jobs are not even advertised to the public at all because an employer fills that position through current employees or friends and family of current employees. And so it's so important as a job seeker that people are telling their friends, their family, their previous coworkers, people at church, everybody that they know that they're job hunting and this is the type of job they're looking for. And then that gets that word out and they're just so much more successful. Networking is really super important. External job postings might occur in a few different ways. So we might see this on the company website. We might see it on a job listing site, or maybe even somewhere like Craigslist or Facebook or LinkedIn, or maybe all of them. They might utilize all of those as options. There are even still some employers that prefer to hang the help wanted sign in their window. And again, maybe even all of those options. When in person, respond to a help wanted sign in a window in person for the most part. You could call and see if they're still hiring or what their process is, but I suggest just going in, but prepare as if you are going to have an interview. When you walk in that door, be dressed for an interview, have time for an interview. Don't bring your phone with you. Don't be chewing gum. Don't bring your kids. Make sure that you are presenting the best you when you walk in the door. Ask for the manager. Let them know that I'm very interested in the job that I saw posted outside. Some online postings might also indicate that they want you to come in and apply in person. And if so, we're just going to follow any directions that we see in that posting. So if it says to go in person, go in person, pick up the application, submit it online, do whatever it asks you to do. When we're talking online postings, follow the instructions on the job posting to apply for that available position. Some job postings will have a button that says apply and you just click right there and start that process. Others are going to have a button that's going to take you to a different site or maybe a hyperlink that takes you to a different site to start that application process. And there are even some postings that are going to ask you to send an email and they'll want you to send your resume and sometimes a cover letter, sometimes not, to express your interest in that position. You see a lot of those on like Craigslist or Indeed. Just email me your resume. We're going to tackle everything that you need to know concerning that application process, the filling out of the application process today. Although some of that advice is consistent, I would suggest to the job seekers that they tune in to the resume and that cover letter presentation for all that they need to know about the applying online piece, because they'll want to make sure that that resume and cover letter is really finely tuned. We'll want to draft too, not just attaching the resume, but they'll want to draft an email that introduces themselves in a professional way and expresses their interest in the position. They're going to want to attach a PDF version. That is important because sometimes the Word version of your resume is going to look differently when it's opened through a different program. We don't know what the employer has for a program. And if they're using, say, Google Docs, it might open and what you thought was going to fit on one page might be a page and a half. Maybe the margins are all wonky and the section that was your education was supposed to start on the first page and now it's half on one page and half on the other, or something wonky. If you save it as a PDF, it's going to look exactly like you intended it to look. So save it as a PDF and send that PDF version of the resume and the cover letter. And then end the email with the best way to contact you. I'm a firm believer that that's very helpful from an employer point of view. If I look at your resume and decide I might be interested, when I go back to find your information, if I open your email and it says right there, call me at, and here's my phone number, it's much easier than me opening your resume again. And so you're just making their life easier. Make it as easy as you can for people. We want to help the employer to help us get a job. Oh, there we go. So we're going to begin by discussing the things that a person needs to do just to prepare for applying for the job. So before they even start the process, they're going to need to gather some information that's needed, find some peace and quiet, and then take time to actually read the application first. Now, before we get going, I'll point out that in the chat, I did add 2 different documents in there, so you should be able to pull those up and look at those if you want to. The first one is Job Application 101, and that's just the slide version of this presentation. The second one is Job Application Information Sheet, and this is, and we'll talk about this on the next screen, but this is going to help people who want to just kind of jot down the necessary information so they can keep that cheat sheet. They could also use another option. That isn't the only option, but kind of helpful. So it's always good to have a good cheat sheet prepared with all the important information that a person is going to need. They're going to want to complete information on either the job information sheet, which is the handout, which let me show you. Let me show you. Here it is. And I took this information from a couple of different sources, some that were sent to me from different offices, and also from this little book. Can you all see that? One of those little, it's kind of like the Surviving a Layoff book, except for that they're little versions and they come once a month. They're pretty good information. So they have a whole section in here that's the same thing that you could just fill out, good information to have with a person. So I created it and worked really hard to get it on 2 pages because it wanted to be 4. And so it is small font, but I think it would be easier for a job seeker to have a couple of pages than to have 4 or 6 pages. So let me know what you think of that, what your feedback is as far as that is. That's what both files say when you click on them. This item no longer exists. Does everybody get that or just Megan? Megan says she gets a thing that says it doesn't exist. I'll see if I can open it. Sure, let me open it. It opens okay for me. I was able to download. So Megan, try again. Just click on it to see if it'll open it in Teams, or you can click the little 3 dots and say download. Sometimes because there's a lot of us trying to access it, it might kind of jumble up. I can open in browser, but it won't let me open in Teams. Oh, interesting. And you should be able to download it, I would hope. And yeah, sometimes when we're all in there, it kind of jumbles up the system. I think it's kind of like a bottleneck. And so it just takes a second to try it again. Good, good. Okay, I'm not going to re-upload it. I think it's probably there. I think that it is a nice handy information to have here, but I don't want people to get too stuck on, especially if we do a presentation that's a recorded version and it's on YouTube. Somebody might not be able to access this document or have it right there at the ready. Maybe they don't have a printer. They can certainly write the information that they need down on a sheet of paper, or they can use something like the generic application, which I've mentioned here, and in the notes section, I put the hyperlink to our generic application. And let me tell you, I had a struggle finding it online. I think that when they changed our website around, they moved some links around, and it was a little bit more difficult for me to find than normal. And so when I did find it, I put that link on our resource library. So if you need that link to the generic app, know that it's just right there and handy on that main homepage of the resource library. Now it's just called employment application or generic employment application. I think it's just a hyperlink. But they can fill out the pocket resume too. That's not a bad little document. It's not nearly as comprehensive. It's, I think it only has space for 2 or 3 work histories because it is so small and nice. It's nice to have it be able to be just folded and put in your wallet. But at the same time, if you really want to get comprehensive with the information that you're going to keep track of, it might be more helpful to have something that, gathers a little bit more information. So I think the job application info sheet is great, but not necessarily, the end all be all. Somebody could just write it in a notebook if that works for them. A couple of things to keep in mind. Take your time when you gather the information. Don't just guess, especially employment dates. That's really important. And if you just randomly guess and go, oh, I don't know, I think it was winter, let's call it December, that's not very good. If you get hired and they call the employer to verify, they're going to wonder why it was so far off or why you didn't give good information. And there's a couple of things a person can do to kind of narrow down their timeline. One thing I found super helpful in the last few years, Facebook is great. If you're updating your Facebook status when you quit one job and you start another one, that's a good place to go back to find your dates of when that occurred. The other thing is, of course, a payroll stub. If you keep your payroll stubs, you can look that up and see when that last stub was that you got. You could also just call the employer. You don't even have to give your name. You can just say you're verifying employment. That's what's going to happen when the employer calls them and verifies employment. What dates are they going to give? They have it all in your payroll file. So, in your personnel file, you call them and find out what the date is. Having all your info on a flash drive could be helpful too. I agree. You could maybe even copy and paste some things into the app. That's absolutely true. Yeah. Or on your computer. Yep. Makes me wonder how I could use Excel for this. One thing I could do as well as that document, I could make it a fillable form if that would be helpful, where somebody could type it in instead of printing it and copying it. So let me know what y'all think about that. Would it be better to have it be a fillable form or maybe 2 different options? We could totally make that work. Um, Okay, so as far as the information, we're going to get a good date and we're going to maybe call an employer to make sure that we get that good date. We also want to get we want to make sure that the spelling is correct on things like your employer information and your education and stuff. So look that information up, make sure that the names of the businesses are correct and complete. If it's Rural Dynamics Incorporated, make sure you get the incorporated piece. Google it if you aren't sure. Get a correct address and the correct phone numbers of a business. They may have moved, so make sure you're looking this stuff up. And check with your references to make sure that they're going to give you a raving recommendation. Some of the things that they're going to need: work history. In our little comprehensive list, we want to list as much as they can possibly remember. That doesn't mean they're going to put it all on their application or on their resume, but if it's in the cheat sheet, if it's asked to go back that far, they'll have it at the ready. So keep all of that information on your cheat sheet. They might not need to include it, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be there. What do they need to have? business name, address, phone number, immediate supervisor and a phone number if you have that, their job title, the duties, their accomplishments, special skills, equipment used, start and end dates. And this is all on this little guy. So you'll see employment history. You have the company name, accomplishments, special information, all that jazz. You mean job service doesn't keep track of it for us, right? Question, how do you address if the supervisor passed away? I I think it would depend on how it was listed on the job app. If it asked you for an immediate supervisor, I would, and let me know what you all think. I think I would put their first and last name and put deceased behind it, unless you know a new supervisor that could speak to that. Or maybe you just put the HR's information. I mean, if they want to call and verify your employment, who would they call now? So is it that they're verifying the employment, or do that they want that immediate supervisor who actually supervised you? It would be the question, I think. But yeah, deceased, I think is fine. HR info is what I've received. Yeah, and I think HR info is probably what they want most of the time. Yeah, I'm guessing. It just depends on the job app and how it asks for things. And I do think that when they're looking at work history and in our little cheat sheet, we want to make sure that they have the, they can list what happened in between any employment gaps. And I have a whole screen or two actually covering what to do with those employment gaps. But anything that's over 6 months, 6 to 9 months long, and they want to address that employment gap. So they can just write it in the space in between if they know that, hey, I had a baby, that's what was going on between those. But just so that they kind of have some dates and they know what happened during that period of time. And the next thing they're going to need to have are skills and abilities. So this is going to be helpful when they're creating a resume, but also when they're filling out a job app. And they want to consider the position that they're applying for, and then the skills and the abilities that that position is going to require. Where have they done that before? What have they done in life that has lent them to have those skills and abilities? And in our little, I should just leave this up. In our little deal here, I've got our skills on each one of the employment histories, but then we've also got a section for skills down here, additional information for special skills. So if they got a special skill or an ability somewhere other than a workplace, they can certainly put that in another spot, or if they have so many that they just won't fit. As far as your education goes, this is going to be when you're doing your cheat sheet, you want everything, your education, your licenses, certifications, trainings. We're going to list everything that's going to make a person more employable. So don't worry about something that's an outdated, expired certificate unless it's going to make you more employable. I've heard a lot of people that came back when we talked about resumes that said, if you had a CNA and it expired 6 months ago, but you can get it again, it might be helpful to put on there that, yes, I was a certified nursing assistant. I agree with that. But if it's something that, it expired in 2010 and I'm not doing that work anymore, it's really not going to help me to be more employable. So maybe we can not list that. And we'll want to list any accrediting institutions, of course, and any dates if that's relevant. And some of them don't have an expiration, but if they do, we want to list that it expires. What if the business closed where they worked? Yep, they want to put that down. Yep, you still got to put it down. Do they put their former supervisor's personal phone numbers? I think if they can get them, certainly, because it helps them to be able to verify that employment. But we might not be able to. I wouldn't unless that former supervisor is close enough, possibly even use them as a reference. Yeah, but I think you would want to make sure that you can utilize that information, call them and find out. And if it's going to be a good recommendation, that matters too. If they left under bad circumstances, it might be good that the business closed. And having your licenses and certifications scanned in a PDF file is really helpful. I agree. I think there's not a lot of job applications that let you upload that information, but that doesn't mean not having them is a bad idea. And then when they do need them, they can easily print them right from there. I know I helped somebody upload a bunch of them though, so that it does happen. Yeah. I'm glad to have it in the chat file because I'll definitely add that to the presentation. Okay, so next is reason for leaving. This is not something that you're typically going to put on your resume, but it is a good thing to have at the ready in case an application asks for it, which is where we usually see it. So employers like to see longevity. Even if you left voluntarily, they're going to question why. So always try to spin the answer in a positive way. If you can show forward progression, like career advancement, that's great. If it happens to be a step back, maybe it's something like more stable job opportunity. Or some options when a person's fired might be probationary period, if you were let go during the probationary period, or job ended, laid off, terminated is not god awful, and no longer a good fit is also something that works out pretty well. I think it's important to stress that they need to be honest, because this employer, if they're a good fit, they're gonna call and they're gonna verify. And now that they've verified, what are they gonna find out? Because if you say you left because it was, a layoff, and the employer says, no, we fired them for whatever, that's not good. So we want to make sure it's honest information that's not going to come back and bite them. And also, don't boss bash. We say this all the time, but I think it's a really important one here. They need to make sure it's a positive spin and doesn't look bad for the employer point of view at all. Federal apps want lots of information. That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And the last thing we want to get together is your references. We want somebody to have probably 3 to 5 good references at the ready. And that's going to depend on the job and the company to which they're applying for. I know me personally, my references change for the jobs that I would be applying for, because this person is more applicable if I'm applying at this job. And if you know someone from that organization, you're going to want to tap in and use them if you can. It's going to be somebody that can speak to your work ethic, to your character, and to your abilities. So a former employer, a supervisor, even a coworker is going to be a great fit. You could also use a teacher or a coach or a mentor or even a clergy member in a pinch. Key here, make sure you contact the reference and make sure they're okay with you giving out that information. Let them know that you're applying for a job, what kind of jobs you're applying for, and all of that. Don't spring this on them willy-nilly. And even if you've okayed using somebody as a reference in the past, I always say touch base with them again, because if I told you that you could use me 2 years ago, if I have a new position now and it's a conflict of interest, which happened when I took my job at Job Service, I can't just willy-nilly be people's reference anymore. So you want to touch base with those people and make sure that it's still okay, that they know you're using them. Now, that application is one of the employer's first impressions of somebody. They're able to tell so much by just reading and honestly looking at the application. There's a couple of things to consider before we even put pen to paper, before we even start filling anything out. First thing, of course, read the entire job description. Find out what is the deadline. When is the last day that you're going to be able to apply? And not just the day, but the time. Like our state jobs, they close at midnight. Okay, well, midnight of what day? Let's figure out exactly how much time we have so that we can make sure we put our heart and soul into that application and do it right. If it says that it's going to be open until filled, we kind of want to take initiative and get in there, because they might fill it today at 2 o'clock. We don't want to wait until next week and then miss the boat entirely. They need to read the entire application before they start filling anything out. That way, you know what is and isn't covered in each one of those sections. Now, when you're doing an online one, that might not be something that we can do because we can't progress to the next page. But when we have a paper app, we certainly can. So we want to look at every section, because we don't want to have to repeat information if we put it in the wrong place. Oh, I put it up here. I didn't know it was going to ask for it down here too. That doesn't look very professional. So read it all first and then start filling it out. I suggest that they sign up for a professional email address. There's no reason that you can't sign up for a new email address just for job search. Your name should be in the email, nothing that's, a fun little nickname or anything crazy like that, your actual name. And a lot of people are tempted to put their birth year. I don't think that's a great idea. I think it dates them. If somebody saw Karen Vanny 1970, they would be doing the math and figuring that that was my birth year. So why add it in there? It's not going to help you at all. You might as well, pare that back. Another thing I saw online was add your middle name. If your name isn't available and that's why you wanted to choose one with a number at the end, what about putting your middle name in there or your middle initial in there? That might help so that you can get something that's a little bit more professional. And if you get an email that's dedicated to job search, it certainly does make it easier to keep track of who's responding to you and to be able to just help you figure out what's what in that world. Okay, let's see. These are some good resources that I use. Okay. Good reasons for leaving work. Okay. And tips for listing job. Oh, good deal. All right. Thank you, Kathy. That's excellent. In those cases, open until filled, I recommend people call to make sure it's still open. That's a good idea too. Right. And especially, I think it depends on where you saw the posting, but especially Indeed. I find so many on Indeed that aren't open anymore and they just haven't gone, the employer hasn't gone in to remove them. So always a good idea to call to see if it's still open, I think. Next, we want to research the company, their missions, values, and whatnot. Let them know that your values align and when you're filling out the app. And find a way to carry important documents safely. Things like your resume, cover letter, your reference sheet, your cheat sheet, all of those things. You don't want to be taking that place to place and spill coffee out or anything. You don't want to turn in an application that's been folded or it's rumpled or God forbid that it has a muddy footprint from being on the floorboard of your car. So put those in, even if it's just a manila folder. It doesn't have to be anything expensive or crazy. It doesn't have to be a briefcase, but put it somewhere where it's going to be safe. And I know at Job Service, we've got a lot of different options to be able to, give people a folder or something to be able to help them carry things in a nice professional way. It looks good when you show up there too, if you have a nice little manila folder. And finally, pay attention to what's being asked and how you're expected to respond. Use words and expressions that are clear and concise and can be easily interpreted. So when you're filling out each section, reread the section before you start filling it out and answering it. And make sure that you've crafted what you want to say before you actually start saying it. Okay, how about questions or comments? Did I get to everything? Did I miss any? Looks like I got it all so far. Okay. The next section we're going to talk about is going to discuss a few things to remember when we're completing the application, just to make sure we get it right. So take your time. We want to talk about expecting the unexpected and asking for 2 copies of an application so that in case something goes wrong, making sure that your handwriting is neat and legible, and then finding a way to check your spelling to avoid any errors. Now is not the time to rush. Take your time to do it right, whether you're applying online or if you're applying on a paper app. So we're going to cover paper application first. First thing to do is ask for 2 copies. If you have a copy machine at home, you could just make a copy, just ask for one, that's fine, but make a copy before you fill anything out. If you're printing, if you come to Job Service and you find the app and it says print this and fill it out, print 2 copies instead of just one. Use a blue or a black pen, not both. And don't go back and forth. Don't use a pencil. And also try to use the same pen throughout the application. If you start with a black gel pen and then you switch to a regular ballpoint black pen, those aren't going to match either and aren't going to look as professional. So just try to stick with the same. Print clearly. Don't use cursive. Take your time to fill it out neatly. That employer might judge you based on that handwriting. Sloppy handwriting might be an indication of the quality work that you're going to be submitting. So best to type the application if you can. If it's an option where it's a fillable form and then you can print it like our generic app, that's a much better option than to print it, handwrite it in there. So if that's an option, utilize that. Use full sentences. Use complete words. Don't abbreviate things. And use correct word pairings. And pay special attention to the current and the past tense verbs. If you're looking at skills or things that you did at a job and you don't work at the job anymore, that's going to be past tense. If you're currently working at that job and doing those things, then it's going to be present tense. And use correct grammar and spelling. And honestly, if you're in doubt, Google it. Google is a really great resource. And if you have a word that you're just not sure of how to spell, even if it's not hard to spell, if you're just not positive, Google it. Better safe than sorry. Make sure that you have it right before you put pen to paper. This is what we're trying to avoid. Do not cross anything out or write over something or use whiteout on a job application. Get a new application and start over. Now, when we're applying online, if possible, copy and paste the questions into a Word document so you can craft your answer there. You might lose your internet connection. You might run out of time and need to finish it later. Not every app lets you save and return later either. If you have it all in a Word doc, you can just copy and paste it over. You might need to work through the application page by page, though. It might not all be on one page to copy and paste over. And also, sometimes there's a word or a character limit, and we have to really be careful about the way we craft our answers to make sure that we can fit it all in the whole. Word, you can use that again there. If you type it into Word, you can select that section and then look in the review tab, and there's a tab there for word count, and you can find out if it's character limit or word limit and find out exactly how many words you have so that you can manipulate your words to make sure that you get everything that you want to get in there. Of course, you can use spell check. If you're in Word, you can just utilize that spell check, which is helpful. If you're not, if you upload Grammarly, it will check most online submittals too. So once you upload that and you have Grammarly running and you're logged in, so if you go to, if you're using Chrome and you log into Grammarly in that Chrome version, it should update your submittals when you're doing them online in Chrome as well. Write professionally, use full sentences, don't abbreviate unless you've spelt it out first, and do both if you, especially if it's in the job description, because you want those things to match. So certified nursing assistant and then CNA. Use keywords. Online applications are almost always using an applicant tracking system. So the way to win is to match those keywords from the job description as many times as you can. So use your keywords. That's especially important on online apps. And reread your answers before you click continue. If you see a continue button, you know you're going to go on to the next page. Look over every single answer that you've put in every single hole. Make sure that everything's answered that should be, that's spelled right, that the grammar's okay, and there's nothing missing. Looks like we're okay over there. Any questions or comments? I always have people print out the job description for the position that they're applying for. Yep, I talk about that too. Or have it pasted into a Word document, and then they're answering the questions. They can insert keywords and phrases from the description. Perfect. I love that. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully they've already highlighted them at this point too. And I haven't talked about that. Maybe I'll just chat that real quick here. I liked. Then I'll remember to add that. The next section is about following directions. So one of the most important things to remember is to follow the instructions. Read everything presented to you and follow those to the letter. There's even a couple of unwritten rules that are worthy of noting. So next we'll discuss what to do in those areas that you don't need. If you have a line that it's not applicable, what to do if you can't fit everything in a hole, they don't give you a spot that's big enough. And some good advice is don't say, see my resume. Don't refer to your resume, write it out again. We'll talk about why. It's also a good idea to print out and save the job description, because sometimes after the job closes, the job description disappears too. Yep, Yep, absolutely. That's one of my final tips. I totally agree. So we're going to follow any and all instructions to the letter. Failure to do so is going to indicate that you don't know how to follow directions, and it's going to show that you probably aren't going to be a good direction follower on the job either. Answers to every question that we want to answer, every question that's posed to us. We need to demonstrate to that employer that we can read, we can understand the question, and we can follow directions. On the left is a paper application. And under the first section there, you can see that there's questions that are left blank. And that's because it says, if yes, answer this question. This person answered no. So they know that they don't need to complete that line. So we don't need to put not applicable, because we can prove to them that I read the instructions. I understand that I said no, so I don't need to worry about this line. Under the education section, though, you can see that they recently graduated high school. They don't have any college education yet. So they mark those fields NA, N/A for not applicable. And that shows them then that I understand that you want this information. It doesn't apply to me personally. On the right, same kind of a thing. We've got the online application in which there's some fields that are marked with an asterisk, which means that they have to enter something there. And then there's also 2 additional fields that they don't need. They don't have an asterisk, so they wouldn't have to fill those out. But they have entered the NA in those fields to indicate, I understand the purpose of this field, but I have no reason to use it. So it is showing that I acknowledge the fact that this is here and I don't need that option personally. Let's see, Caitlin says, I recommend that as well to use to update their resume to get the job, as well to use to update their resume. Oh, sure. Yeah, the job description. Yeah. And having the job description, if you get called for an interview, could be so helpful. Yeah, I agree. And honestly, I personally suggest keeping the copy of the resume and the actual job app if you can print it out too. Because if they call you in 2 weeks, it's hard to remember when you're applying for a lot of jobs. It's really nice to have something to go back on. And my suggestion is to keep it all either in a flash drive or even like a 3-ring binder or a folder so that you can have them all together, all that information together. And you could also email it to yourself, put it in a special folder. There's lots of ways to keep that information. Depends on the person and how tech savvy they are. So there are certain questions that are asked in an application that require a little bit more space than they provide there. And that can be difficult both when with paper apps and with online. So we'll talk about paper apps first. First of all, in that hole that they've asked for that question, whether it's skills and abilities or why did you leave the job, provide as much as you can in that space. Write small and try to get it all in the hole. If you can't, then write as much as you can and then put see attached where you can finish your answer. Don't just put see attached. Fill out as much as you can so that you get them interested in looking at that later. On that second sheet of paper that you're going to put, make sure that you put your name on there and the title of the job description, or the title of the job position that you're applying for, and the section. So if it was reason for leaving job number 1, that's what I would put, reason for leaving ABC Construction or whatever it was. And you could also use other fields, like they might have a field on the paper app that says additional information. Maybe you don't need to put anything else there, and you could use that section to finish, and you could, say continued in additional information section. That's an option too. If they allow it, attach a resume and a cover letter, and that way you can kind of mention the things that you weren't able to mention. So if there wasn't enough space to put all the skills and abilities and accomplishments, you can use an attached resume to be able to fill those gaps. You can use your cover letter to answer some of those unanswered questions. Also, especially things like, why did you leave a job? You could use your cover letter to further explain those things that it only gave you so much space to do. Having the job description, if you could call for that. Oh, yeah, I already read that one. Okay, we're good. As far as an online application is concerned, they often have character limits that are going to keep you from being as descriptive as you want to be. That's a little bit more of a struggle. Your only option really is going to be to take advantage of that space as much as you can. So read each section really carefully so that you know what you can put here and if it's possible to put something else in another hole down the way. Another thing is don't waste any space. Don't waste space entering information that's not applicable, especially to the job. Why put a job duty in there that they know you know how to work a mop? You don't need to write that down, or it doesn't apply to the job at all. Only put the things that are really the meat and potatoes. We don't want to waste our space because that it's very limited. If they allow you to attach a resume, use that to fill in the blanks, just like you do with the paper one. And the same thing with the cover letter. If they allow you to give it a cover letter, explain the information that you weren't able to explain in the cover letter. And the see attached, the thing is here, a lot of people get frustrated because they took a lot of time and effort to create this resume, and they have this resume, and now I have to apply for a job and I have to put all that same exact information in here to apply for a job. That's true. They are asking you to do that. If you have your resume in a digital format and you upload it, it should pre-populate a lot of those fields and make your life a little bit easier. But we do not want to put see attached resume in any holes. We don't want to do that on a paper app. We don't want to do it on an online app. Hiring managers, they are looking for consistent answers, and the applications give them that. There's a reason they chose to use the format they did. If they wanted your resume, they would have said, email me your resume. They want you to fill out this application. We want to do what they've asked us to do, use their guidelines and give them the information that they need. Hiring managers consistently mention this as being a pet peeve. So don't make them look somewhere else for the answer. As an employer, I can tell you that when I say apply for the job and fill out an app, I want to be able to look at 5 different applicants and have 5 different applications that look exactly the same. So when I want to look for education, I know I'm going to flip to the second sheet and the third section down. It's going to look the same on all 5 applications. And it doesn't look like that if you're offering you're looking at, oh, education, see the resume. Okay, I got to dig over here for the resume. So don't make them work hard for it. And make sure the field's populated properly. Yep, absolutely, from the resume that you uploaded. I think I mentioned that in here, but if I didn't, I will. Yep, absolutely. Let's see. Okay, how about that section? Anything to add before we move on to the different sections and the kind of tips and tricks on each section? Not yet. Okay. So next we're going to cover just basics on what to include in each section of the application. And we'll talk about personal information, the work history section, and education. We talked a little bit about it on our cheat sheet, but this is when you're actually answering the application itself. And we're going to also cover in this section some questions that are sometimes a little bit difficult to answer, or maybe people just don't quite understand what's being asked. And so we'll talk about those. As far as personal information, you're going to have some of the following, maybe not all of it, but it just depends on the application itself. But refer to your completed job application information document to use as a cheat sheet when you're filling this stuff out. You will need to have your name. Now, some applications will ask for legal name and then preferred name. So if my legal name is Richard, but my preferred name is Rich, you can put those 2 things. In fact, from what I saw when I was doing my my research, it didn't make it sound like on a job application, if it just has name, you could put your preferred name there as long as when you get hired, you make sure that they know on the hiring onboarding paperwork that your real name is Richard, not Rich. Also, if there's a section for middle name, you want to enter yours. That actually makes it's more applicable. And from the research that I did, and I did put the link in here where I got this information, it indicates that using a middle name or a middle initial gives the impression that you're more professional and that you're smarter and that you will probably be better at your job. So if it asks for it, put it. The other thing is that if you don't put it, you're going to have a blank space. So if you have a blank space, you should probably put an A there. Is it really not applicable? Do you not have a middle name? So unless there's a really great reason to not put your middle name, you probably should. They want to put their full address. This is going to be mailing and street if it's different, and also correct zip code. I can't believe how many people don't know their zip code in Great Falls, Montana. I don't know if this is a problem in other places, but they just don't know. Google it. Google the address and Google will tell you where the zip code is. Make sure you're giving the right information. Phone number is the same thing. Make sure it's a good phone number. Enter your personal number and maybe a message number. If you don't have a phone number, or if you don't know, you're still going to have a phone number. A lot of our folks that have applied for unemployment, they aren't getting unemployment yet. They don't have any money. They're going to run out of minutes. They know on the 17th they're not going to have money for minutes. They better have a backup plan for a phone then at that point. And if they're going to use a message phone, find somebody that they can trust, that's going to get them their messages promptly, and that ask permission ahead of time. Use that message phone and make sure, if you can anywhere, to indicate it's a message phone. Write message there so that they know they're not calling to get a hold of Karen. They're going to ask. Let's see. Thanks for the info on the middle name. That's something people wonder about. Yeah. I can't believe how many people think Great Falls is one word. Right. Yeah. And Montana Works doesn't even bring up anything if you use Great Falls as one word or not capitalized. On and all one word. Love that. Thanks, Sean. Okay, let's see. Full address, phone numbers, email address. Make sure it's correct. One misplaced period or an underscore will make you unavailable to the employer. So keep that in mind. Absolutely, positively need to make sure that it's correct. If they are at all questioning it, go on their phone, go on their email account and email themselves a message, or email it to you, the workforce consultant, and you can let them know what it comes across as being if they don't know how to check that on their phone or whatever. In the email section, especially a paper app, you might have to write really small. The emails are long and you want to make sure that you get it all there. You don't want to miss any part of it. So write small and write it very neat, because otherwise it's hard to read and then they might not be able to reach out to you. Make sure your email is professional and not something inappropriate. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like I said earlier, now's a good time to get a new professional email just for job search. So, when you're starting this process, heck, why not get one now? I like to encourage people to do that because they aren't sifting through a bunch of other emails. It's just for job search and it's free. We want to make sure they double check any contact information they've entered for accuracy. The employer won't be able to contact them if the phone number's wrong, or if it's not illegible, they can't read the email. Oh, and look, here it is. Make sure that your email is professional and one that you check every single day. You want to make sure that it's something that you're on top of and you're paying attention to. Set up, empty, and change your voicemail. Make sure that if you're waiting for an employer to call you, that they have a way to leave a voicemail for you. Make every effort to listen to your voicemails right away and turn off any roboblockers that you might have turned on. You don't know who's going to be calling you. And especially with these ATS programs, they're calling from some pretty wonky numbers. One trick pony at gmail.com, not acceptable. I don't think so, Kathy. Right. Okay. I have one that was sexy brown eyes 76. Yeah, not a great professional email. And also, now's a great time to get together your proof of identification. If and when you're hired, you're going to need to provide those documents in order to work. So what they'll need is either a passport, that alone will do it, or a driver's license or a state ID. And in addition to that, a birth certificate and a social security card. So make sure they have them. If they don't, now's a good time to go and put in a request to get a duplicate or whatever. Be proactive so that you're not getting a job offer and don't have the option to be able to go and get that social security card mailed to you. Do ATS leave messages? I don't know, actually. I think, well, let me clarify. When I said with ATS playing a part and then it might look like a robocall, ooh, what happened there? It's because an employer will sign up for ATS and they'll use the ATS system to make the call. So it'll call out from a different number, but it's still an employer on the other line. And if they're actually calling, it should be an employer. If ATS reaches out to somebody, it's usually text or an email. So that wouldn't be a worry. One hot Montana mess. It took my resume class. Great. Yeah, nice. As far as the employment information piece, the previous information on an application itself, generally speaking, go back 7 years, maybe 10 years if it's applicable. Only 7 years is necessary if it's going to cover all the information that you have. If you have applicable work history, you can go back all the way to 20 years ago if you feel like it's going to help you get the job. List your employment in reverse chronological order. So the most recent first. List any promotions that you have with the same company as separate positions with the same company. And if you have a job between two applicable jobs, so let's say that I am a certified nursing assistant, but I got hurt on the job and couldn't do CNA work for a while. And so I took a job at McDonald's for 6 months. Still list the McDonald's job, even though it might not be applicable to the job that you're applying for today, a CNA job. You want to be able to show that that gap was filled with something that was worthy. Just don't worry about wasting too much time and energy putting accomplishments unless they're directly related to the same accomplishments that are going to align to the job that you took or that you're applying for. As far as what we need, business name, address, phone number, the immediate supervisor, all stuff we have on our cheat sheet, right? Duties, accomplishments, special skills, equipment that you use that might be applicable to this job, maybe your start and end dates. The other thing that some applications ask for is a starting salary and an ending salary. That might be worthy of adding to your cheat sheet, and maybe a reason for leaving. Make sure that we can answer all of those questions, and then explain any gaps in employment that you might have. So how do we do that? Expert advice suggests that we explain any employment gaps that are longer than 9 months. So 6 to 9 months long, explain those. Gaps in employment raise suspicion, and not explaining those gaps encourages that hiring manager to use their imagination to figure out why. So first consider whether your gap was voluntary or whether it was involuntary. So did you take a break to volunteer? Did you go back to school or to raise children? Or was it involuntary? Did you get laid off because of COVID? Or are you managing health issues? Explain the gap in your work history will put that hiring manager at ease. It's going to let them know that the break is nothing for them to be concerned about. It's really a non-issue. Don't worry about why I was off. It's all better now. So first thing, prepare for the conversation. Think about the things that you did during the time that you were off that increased your employability. What can you talk about that you did that's going to make you a better employee for them? Don't try to hide those gaps, especially by like fudging the dates or ignoring the time altogether. The hiring managers can do the math. So they're going to do the math and see that there was a 3-year gap or whatever. Some job seekers think, well, if I just fudge this a little and I change this August end date to December and change this start date from March to January, it'll look better. The hiring manager, when they find out you fudged, which they're going to do that when they call and verify, they're going to find out. And now they're going to see you as dishonest. So be honest. An employer is going to be more understanding of a person's personal situation than they are of a liar. Be honest. Stay positive. Talk up the value that was provided in that short period of time you were off. Did you go back to school to earn a degree? Did you earn a certification? Did you learn a new skill? Did you do some work on the side that you can utilize and say, I have this skill now and experience that I didn't have? And I think one more click, there we go. Whenever possible, show closure or resolution. If you can say that this issue has since been resolved, like let's say you had a kidney transplant, you weren't able to work for a year because of that. You could put major health issue since resolved. Now they know. And I thought that it would be really helpful for folks to see examples. Oh, what did I miss over here? Is there a good one-liner to explain a gap based on incarceration? You know, Angie, let's table that till next week. Next week's presentation, we have a guest facilitator. Yay! Terry Knutson is going to talk to us about tips, job seeker tips, talking about people that are re-entering the workforce. So wonderful, good information. I'm sure she will have an answer for us on that one. Show employment gaps in the experience section of the resume or list it. And you'll see these are resume examples because it's what I could find online, but you could list this just as easily in a job application in that work experience section. So list the gap as if it were a job with your applicable dates. Use bullets to explain briefly and highlight any skills that you learned during that time. These examples show employment gaps on resumes, but you can also include time on an application. So if it was, 7 years or whatever, you can include that there. And remember, if you provided any services during that period of time, you could consider it self-employment. Did you clean houses for your aunt that time? Did you do childcare for your cousin? Did you provide general labor? Maybe you just helped out friends and family and people at church. How about lawn care? Any of those things, you could say I was self-employed childcare for X amount of time. Another option is to list a sabbatical under the company name, put yourself under the supervisor, and then the reasons under the job duties. So you can actually utilize that. So here we have sabbatical from 2017 to present, took time off to be with family after the loss of a child. They're going to understand that. Founded Southern California chapter of Butterfly Legacy Foundation and handled all accounting and budgeting, raised donations 50% in 1 year. Those are all worthwhile things of mentioning and looks good. Professional experience, leave of absence to raise a family. We have our dates over here on our right side, and notable contributions. A great way to show value while you were out of work, but what you were doing during that period of time. And here's a sabbatical from 2017 to present, time off to recover from a car accident. Was able to return to the trail running 2 times a week. That shows them that I'm up to par physically, no problems. I'm back where I needed to be. Oh, and by the way, I took a class with lynda.com in bookkeeping. So tell them about all the wonderful things that you're doing now. If we're talking to a client that is right now experiencing a current gap that they're worried about having to fill, which a lot of them are, if they're job seeking, they might not be currently working. Some things they can consider: consulting. Do some consulting work right now, do some freelance, enroll in a class. Allison.com, which is with 1 L, which I'll put in the chat, is a great resource. It has, oh, that didn't hyperlink it. That wasn't very helpful. It has all kinds of different classes that a person can take for free, and they can put those out there that they were trying to better themselves. Some of them are soft skills, some of them are hard skills. They have computer stuff. It's crazy, all the stuff that a person can do for free. Another option is volunteering. If they volunteer for just a few hours every week, they can add that to their resume for that period of time. If you just volunteer in the kitchen at the homeless shelter 1 time a week for a month, 2 months, 6 months, you can add that as being something that you were during that period and put your accomplishments underneath there. Okay, how about any other questions on that before I move on to education? I don't see anything new. The education section might include not just schools, but also certifications or training programs. We're going to list anything that was a semester or longer. So if it's a real short 2-hour class you did on Allison, that's probably going to go in that other section, depending on what's available in the application itself. But the education is going to be, this section is generally going to be your more formalized education. And we're going to want to list school name or the accrediting institution, whatever that might be. Make sure that name is correct and use the full name. So we aren't going to put MSU or U of M. We're going to write out University of Montana. Make sure you have their address, city, state, zip, make sure that's all correct. Their phone number is the correct number. And then you want your exact name of your diploma or your degree and or the certification name. So don't just come up with it and think, I think that's what it is. Go look on your diploma so you make sure that you type it up right. Other things that the application might ask for, they might want to know the date achieved. That happens a lot on those online apps. It has a spot for that and they expect that. Numbers of years that you attended, and they might even ask for GPA. You don't have to put that information if, if it's not, like if it's a certification, you would just put NA in that area. So other sections that you might find, keep in mind, there are a ton of different types of job applications and each one looks a little bit different. But what we're going to see, some sections that we see pop up from time to time, and this is why it pays to read the entire application, is because if you're on the first page, you might not realize there's an entire section for skills and abilities or whatever that might be. We don't want to squeeze everything into one section if you have a whole other section for certification. So look it all over first. If there's a skills and ability section, this is where we want to consider the position that we're applying for and the skills and abilities with the position and how those are going to align. Which of those skills have you done in a past job or in life in general? And then consider how you can show them that you have that skill, not just I'm a good communicator, but how are you gonna, but what's your proof? And a license and certification, this is where you're going to put something like maybe it's your driver's license number, or maybe it's going to be that you're CNA certification or forklift certified, something like that can go there. Again, don't worry about your outdated or expired certifications unless they're going to make you more employable. Some applications have an other relevant info section, just somewhere where you can just put whatever you need to put there. This is where you're going to make good use of any additional sections that are provided. So if you need to put more skills or special classes you took, or some of those Allison classes, or maybe even just a life circumstance that makes you personally a good fit. Let's say that you're applying for a receptionist job at Voc Rehab, and you put in here that you've been caring for your disabled son since he was born. That's going to show that you have some insider knowledge that you can't really put on your resume in any of your work history sections or anything like that. It's not going to reflect it. So this is a great place to use to market yourself. What makes you special? What is it about you that you want them to know? Put that in that relevant info space. Don't leave this blank. This is a very valuable section for you to be able to talk yourself up. And references, these of course should be, we talked a little bit about who to use, but adults, especially our youth, need to realize that they don't want to be giving their teenage friend. We need to make sure it's an adult. It should be somebody that you've known for at least a year. And it's good to have 3 to 5 of those depending on the job. Someone that can speak to your work ethic and your character, your abilities, your skills. A former supervisor, a coworker, somebody you've worked with or for, even if it's somebody like at church that when you've volunteered, they've been able to see that work ethic. But make sure that you talk to the person ahead of time, ask if it's okay to use them, remind them of the work that you did together and how you worked together in this project to achieve these goals. Offer up details about the position that you're applying for. First of all, they're trying to help you and they're excited about it too. So let them be excited and be a part of that. And then ask them what the best way to reach them. Would you rather they call you? Do you want them to call your work number or your home number? And then ask them what time of day would be the best time. And this screen is these hard to answer questions, and not that they're necessarily hard to answer, but it's nice to know what the employer, why they were asking that question. I guess what was behind it. So the question that says, may we contact this employer? Contacting that employer, we have to keep in mind that a prospective employer does understand that them calling your current employer might cause some problems. And that's really why this question is there. So if you're currently working at that job and it would make it difficult for you, it's okay to put no here. However, my research found if you are not currently employed, it's a ding. If you say no, I don't want you to contact that employer, they want to know why. that is a red flag to the hiring manager saying, why in the world would you not want me to call these people? You must not have left on good terms. The only other reason that would be a good reason to say no if you aren't working there anymore is if if the place is no longer in business, which you could put that for why. Or if you're still employed, and then you could put still employed, exploring advancement opportunities, so they know that I am looking for another job, but they don't know I'm looking for another job, and I don't really need them to know unless this becomes something that's, if I'm a runner up, if I'm, if it becomes a serious adventure, then sure. And this next question, I almost didn't want to bring in at all because I really kind of wanted Terry to be able to speak to it. I'm sure she'll be able to say more than I can. But what about that convicted of a felony question? From what I could find though, and I think this is probably safe to say, make sure that you read it carefully and figure out exactly what they're asking. Because if it's asking if you've been convicted, that's not arrested or charged. That's convicted. So make sure that you're just answering honestly. Also, if your record has been expunged, you do not need to address the charges that have already been expunged in this question. But if you're in something like a treatment court where they're considering expunging it, if you do these things, then until it's expunged, I think you do need to address those. But just read the question carefully and know what you're answering. What type of employment are you interested in? This one usually says full-time, part-time, seasonal. And in those questions, they're asking you about your availability. So including, and some of these questions are about your hours that you're available, the time of day that you're available. Consider that it's a flexibility question. So flexibility is an important employability skill, and it's going to be a beneficial quality. Be honest though, do your homework, research if the position is likely to be nights and weekends or not. Don't apply if you're not available to work the hours that they're asking you to work. So you do want to be open and honest here, but remember that the more available that you look like you are, the more flexible that you look like they are, the more beneficial it's going to be from the hiring person's point of view. They're going to like that. Let's see, we've got for references, we say to make sure that they know job searcher put down as a reference. Yeah, yep. And when asked if can contact employer, is one supposed to give them a heads up if it's a past employer and not a reference? No, I don't think so. Not if you don't use them as a reference. Anybody else want to chime in on that one? I always tell clients that the only reason to mark no on contacting previous is if they know that what the prospective employer will hear is worse than letting them wonder. That's a good point. Because they are going to wonder. Yep, they are absolutely going to wonder. And one of the things that said in my research is you have to remember they can only ask certain questions. And most employers know that they can get into legal problems if they give too much information, and they're very close-fisted about it. They don't give out a lot of information on those phone calls. So it's not as big of a worry for people as they think it is. Now, a lot of the questions that they ask are, what dates did they work there? Would you hire them back? That's probably the one that's the most iffy. Would you hire them back? Yes or no? Because if they say no, they gotta wonder why. Okay, let's see. When are you available to start? What is a good start date? That's kind of a tough one for people too when they go to answer these. This is the employer trying to make sure that your timeline is going to align with their timeline. It doesn't mean that if you say you have to give 2 weeks that they're going to say, oh, I can't wait 2 weeks. So just be honest. That is what we want to do. And we also don't want to look too eager because we don't want to look too desperate for the job. So if we can start right away, a good option is as soon as the beginning of next week, or something like with advance notice, I could start in the next few days. If you need to give notice at work, keep in mind, employers like that. When you leave their job, they want you to give notice to them. So they like to see that notice part. So don't be afraid to say I have to give notice, and just say that. And you don't have to give a date. So if I'm filling out my app today, I don't know if you're going to offer me a job. That might not be for another month. I'm not going to give my 2 weeks today. So you would just put 2 weeks there. You just write out 2 weeks. Or I have several projects to wrap up in my current role. I plan to give them X amount of weeks notice, whether it's 3 or 4 or whatever. If you feel like you want to break between jobs, you're still there right now, but you want a little break, you could do something like, I do have some previously scheduled commitments. My ideal start date would be X amount of weeks from a potential offer. And if you relocate, you would want to put something like, because the position requires relocation, what timeline do you have in mind for someone transitioning? So you just make sure that they know that there's a little relocation, so they might need to give you a little bit of wiggle room. Just make sure that you're realistic when you set expectations for yourself and for the employer, because you don't want them to think that you can start tomorrow when you really can't. Be realistic. Let's see. Okay, nothing new over there. GED and HiSET related questions. And I actually reached out to the people here in town that do the GED to find out, to make sure that I was right on these, that the information I found, on the internet was good here in Montana for a HiSET. And so if they ask, did you graduate? The answer is going to be yes. So we're going to treat the HiSET and the GED as a high school diploma. So yes, you graduated. If it says the number of years for schooling, what they're looking there is for, if you did not graduate and you did not get your HiSET and you left school in the 9th year, you're going to put highest grade completed was 9. Once you get your HiSET, that changes to 12. So regardless of not going back into the high school setting, you did complete 12 years because it's an equivalent of. See, Kathy, there are situations where letters of recommendation can be helpful. If you would like to get a letter of recommendation from a former employer, here's a template that former employers could use. I love it. Excellent. Keep in mind that templates don't look personal, and we want to make sure that they try to, put something in there that's personal, just like you would with anything else. But yeah, a good place to start. It's always nice to have some words on paper to start. Can you perform the essential functions of the job? This usually says with or without accommodations. And what they're talking about here is they're making sure that you read the job description and that you're able to do the job. You are acknowledging that, yes, I can do this job with or without an accommodation. An accommodation is going to make it easier for someone to complete a task. So if you know that they want you to move heavy boxes of paper and you can do that if you can use a hand cart, then no problem. Yes, you can do it. With an accommodation, it'll be possible. Do you have reliable transportation? This one, a lot of folks that I've worked with think that this is asking, do I have a car? Oh, I don't have a car right now. That's not what this question is about. This is employers trying to find out if you can get to work. Is transportation going to be an issue? So whether you own a car or a bike, or if you plan to get to work by riding the bus, or mom's going to drive you, or you're going to walk. If you can say yes to any of those, you can say, yes, I have reliable transportation. I have my 2 feet. And how did you hear about the job? They want to know, first of all, if you have any internal connections. So this is a great time to name drop if you do, if you know anybody, because if you know somebody there, it tends to make better workers. So they like to know if you know somebody that works there. And sometimes they'll ask that. Do you have any friends or relatives that work here? And you can put their information there. But of course, be honest. So don't pretend, or if that person is not going to give a good recommendation of you, you wouldn't want to mention them either. But if you just found a job posting, let them know that too, because they want to know if their job postings are working. So if they've spent money to put something on Indeed, they want to know if that's actually getting them jobs or not. So be honest, but show excitement. And I kind of like the idea here, and you all chime in too. I like the idea of saying, if I found it on Indeed, let's see if it's on their company website too, because if it is, and you say you were excited to see the description on the company website, they're happy to see that you're visiting their company website and that you're involved enough in the community and in what they do to be able to be tapping into that option. Makes them know that their company website is doing them some good as well. Okay, parting thoughts. So last minute thoughts before we wrap up this presentation. We'll cover a few tips, just last minute tips, and then a list of common mistakes to make sure we avoid. The application is one of the employer's first impressions of somebody. They're able to tell a lot about us by reading it and looking at it. A couple of things to think about. Follow directions to the T. If it asks for all your employers for the last 5 years, and to justify gaps, and you list them all, and you might be taking yourself out of the running if you list every job for the last 20 years, or if you don't list 5 years worth. So, or you don't fill the gaps. You got to make sure you do what they ask you to do. Think like an employer, like everything else we've talked about. Think like an employer. What are they looking for in an employee? And show them that you are as many things as possible, as many of those as you can. Use action words in your descriptions. And here I refer to, again, the power verbs. You can use those in your application, just like you would your resume. Instead of saying that I led a project, I oversaw. Instead of I saved money, I decreased, I reduced, I increased efficiency. You could put, instead of changed or improved, I overhauled or refined. Lots of great words in that power verbs handout, which I'll, make sure it's in this section as well. And present positive, honest opinion of yourself. It's important to be honest, but you always want to put a positive spin on everything. If you failed or you were let go, focus on what you learned from the experience. Before you submit an application, track every single job that you apply for so that you have something to reference when they call you. Print and keep the job description and even a copy of the completed application if you can. You might not have access after you apply, and it's sure nice to know what they're looking at on the other side. What did I enter when I applied for that job? And if you are submitting a paper application, make sure that you sign that application before you actually drop it off. There are a lot of them that have that signature line that people forget. So make sure you sign and date it if they have that sign and date on the back. And follow up. Follow up about a week later, call the company, ask for the manager, ask if they know when they expect to make a hiring decision. I would word it that way instead of, did you already hire somebody? Word it as if they haven't called you yet. So you're wondering if you know when they might. And express your ongoing interest. I'm very interested in the job. You could also email an HR manager if you can't, if calling isn't an option. Take a minute to tidy up your web presence. Look at your social media profiles, look at those on a public computer so you can see what it would look like from an outsider point of view. Clean them up if you need to. And keep applying for other jobs. Don't apply for one job and think I'm waiting for the answer. Keep applying. Set a goal for yourself and achieve that, whether that's one job a week or one job a day. Set a goal and make it happen. Some mistakes to avoid. Number one, not following instructions. Read them, follow them to the letter. If you ignore instructions, they think that you're going to do the same on the job. Leaving fields blank. They took the time to ask the question. Take the time to answer. If it doesn't apply to you, if it truly doesn't apply, put NA. Keep in mind, if you leave a section blank, you're giving less information than the other applicant that filled it out. So do you want them making a decision without that information? Turning in an application late. Online portals are probably going to close and won't even let you fill it in. But if it says to email by this day and you send it the next day, it looks like a blatant disregard for their instructions. Also, if you're just dropping it off in the person, it's the same thing. They might have something in line where they just discard it out of principle alone. Maybe not, but how do you know? I guess you could call and ask if it's too late to submit it, but really just try your best to meet those deadlines and not have to worry about it. Submit early, submit a day early. It's always the best option. Spelling and grammar issues. Oh yeah, so either Google it or run a spell check. Ask a trusted friend to look over a paper application before you turn it in. It really shows a lot about the level of professionalism that you have or don't have. Unexplained gaps in employment. It's going to raise a red flag. They're going to wonder about anything over about 6 months. So, they're going to expect the worst case scenario, and that might be just plain laziness. And if you were raising children, that's not laziness at all. So be honest, explain what that issue is. If the issue is medical or personal, tell them what it was, but also issue has since been resolved. not or missing required information. If they've asked you for an attachment, this comes back to instructions. You're not following the instructions. That hiring decision is being based on the documents that they listed. If you didn't give that document, they might just throw out your application all entirely. I know that Beth has said that she's gotten a lot of applications for the workforce consultant that it says submit your resume and cover letter, and they don't submit one or the other. Well, then you're not going to get the job because they're comparing you to people that did submit. Failure to tailor the application to the job. Yeah, that's a huge one. Just randomly uploading a resume and hitting go. That's not going to get you the job. Make sure you're tailoring it. Make sure that you're highlighting those keywords and that you're making sure that you're bringing in as many keywords as you have. Hiring managers have complained about people submitting generic cover letters as well that they didn't make changes to. So it might have an incorrect job title or even company information from a different company. So make sure that you're checking all of that information, check and double check to make sure it's good information. Applying when you're overqualified. Hiring managers understand that if you're overqualified, you have way too much experience or education, that you're probably not going to stay there. They're looking for the right fit. They want someone that's going to stay in the position. So keep that in mind. However, there are some circumstances where somebody needs to or wants to apply for a job which is under the one that maybe they've done in the past. Maybe you're switching industries, or you want to get into a company that's specific with, that, or something that's going to provide some flexibility. In that case, dial back your resume credentials. Be honest, but highlight the skills and accomplishments that are relative to the job you're applying for. Don't state a bunch of things that are over and above and beyond what you've done or will do in this job. Leave those off. You might even have to leave off some experience or education. I worked with a gal that really wanted a bookkeeper position, and she had an accounting degree and she had a bachelor's and would not get hired. And finally, she took the bachelor's off of there, left her associates, and she got the job, and she's still there today. So it absolutely, sometimes it's the better case scenario if you really know you want that job. Underqualified as well. Don't waste their time. If they've told you that they need this specific requirement and you don't have it, then don't waste their time. ATS is probably going to boot you out anyway if you don't have that absolute requirement. But if there's something else, if it's a paper app or a resume, if they say that they need it, give it to them. Again, there's special circumstances where a job seeker is going to want to apply for a job that is a little bit under them. So consider if it says preferences or requirements. If you lack the basic or you have the basic requirements, but you lack a preferred skill, sure, go ahead and apply for that job, knowing that somebody else might have that preferred skill. You could also address any missing requirements in a cover letter. You could say, I know you said you wanted 4 years experience and a bachelor's degree, but you might mention that you have 3 years experience and an associate's degree in the field. That aligns pretty well. You could make that case. Also, you could, if you really wanted to get your foot in the door to business, you could send your resume and your cover letter to the business with a special note that states you're very interested in joining the team, but you recognize that the open position is geared to someone with more experience in education. That way you're not really putting your name in the hat for that job, but for a job that comes up that's available. And confusing the hiring manager. Make sure it's clear and concise picture of what you bring to the table. Don't wow them with big words or unapplicable experience. I think if you are close, I would still apply. With the workforce shortage, more employers are looking at applications differently. Yep, I agree. And I think you just have to be kind of careful how you tweak it and make sure that you're not, wasting their time. Again, if you have to have a bachelor's and you just graduated high school, there's some things that aren't going to be workable, but some are. And our quick recap, you can apply for a job via a paper app, an online app, or an email. Creating a cheat sheet with all the pertinent information that you're going to need to apply will help streamline the process. Plan ahead, submit a professional resume that focuses on your applicable skills and abilities. Answer questions honestly, but remain positive and professional. And keep a log of all the jobs that you apply for, as well as copies of the job description and the job applications. And there you go. call job service and schedule a one-on-one. See here, bring this back, stop screen share. Okay, so what's everyone? Oh, why am I doing this? There we go. There it is. How do we all think? Any idea, anything to add? Any questions? I'll stop recording. There we go.